Hey Hemal,
Hey, how's it going, Alex?
which Flesh and Blood card did you sell the most in the last year at the bazaar?
I think it has to be Sink Below Red. Yeah, everyone needs a Sink Below for their deck, and some people buy multiple. And every single deck in Fab that I know has at least three Sink Belows. So I've sold tons of red Sink Belows.
Man, yeah. At least like everyone gets their sync belows from you then in the last year.
Yeah, I need to tell people to stop. I'm running out of Sink Belows.
Man, I'm so glad we have the time to talk now about Flesh and Blood,
Oh yeah,
but not only about Flesh and Blood, right? We'll also
yeah,
talk a little bit about your past in Yu-Gi-Oh!
oh yeah. It's gonna
And
be
yeah, at
awesome.
this point, yeah, that's right. And I think like for the viewers, we are recording this before Christmas, but actually the episode will go out in the next year. So
Yeah.
yeah, happy New Year to all the viewers.
Happy New Year to everybody. Happy Christmas to everybody that celebrates it as well.
That's right. Yeah. And yeah, welcome to the fifth episode actually here at the Fabled Academy podcast.
Oh yeah.
My name is Alex, and with me is Hemal, my guest. Yeah, who is one of the biggest Flesh and Blood single sellers and also a big enthusiast, a TCG enthusiast that I've ever met. So thank you so much for taking the time, Hemal.
Yeah, no worries. Always happy to be on your podcast and do videos with you. We've done so many over the years, just doing another one now. We have to get one in at least every year.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah. I have to be really honest here. I met a lot of people in the TCG world, and you are like one of the most special ones that I've met.
Yeah.
And not only because, yeah, we have like this connection through Yu Gi Oh! In the past, but also we've met along like different events in Flesh and Blood.
Yeah.
And like I said already, you're a big Flesh and Blood singles seller, and we want to talk about this, right? Your view on the market,
Hmm.
on the prices, but we also want to introduce you, like, why you are actually the person to talk about this topic and to also, yeah, hear your voices.
For sure.
So let's talk about your TCG life at first. Like, when did this passion for TCGs actually came up in your life, and like, why did it spark in general?
I remember growing up, I used to watch a lot of like the Pokemon anime and the Yu-Gi-Oh, TV show that used to come on. And we used to have this local like video game, not video game, but like movie rental place. It used to be called Blockbuster. And we used to go there every weekend. And my dad let me get like a little pass where I could get a movie every weekend. And one weekend they had the Yu-Gi-Oh structure decks there. It was structured at Kaiba, Joey, Pegasus, and what's it called? Yugi. And I bugged my dad, and said, "I want that. It looks cool." I remember seeing the TV show on TV, so I ended up getting that. And I took that deck and I played on the playground and stuff like that. But I forgot about it for about 4 or 5 years. And then come around 2008, 2009, I was in high school and I got very, just bored. You have a lot of free time in America when you're in high school. You get your classes done, you get your homework done, and you're just not doing anything. So I started looking up YouTube videos very early on YouTube back then of people opening up boxes and it just got back into Yu-Gi-Oh that way. It saw a lot of content of a lot of team wars and teams battling each other and found out that there's
Mhm.
a big scene for Yu-Gi-Oh in Houston. So I ended up going to my local store, which I've been going to now for almost 18 years. And
Wow.
yeah, and I ended up just, talking to the guy there, and he's a good friend of mine as well. And he showed me about Yu-Gi-Oh! And I think at the time, the newest set that had come out was not Duelist Genesis. It was a couple sets before that. It was like right around Supreme Darkness, right when
Hmm.
Dark on Dragon came out, when the
Yeah.
TCG. So I got really into that. Bad time to get into it because everything was really expensive. But I got into
Yeah.
Yu-Gi-Oh that way, and ever since then, I played Yu-Gi-Oh casually for a couple of years, and then
Hmm.
competitively from about 2009 till about 2017. And then I did Magic from 2017 till about 2020, and then Fab
Okay.
since then.
Yeah. So when we are talking about you competing in these games, like
Mhm.
on which level did you actually compete in Yu-Gi-Oh! And Magic?
In Magic, it was mostly the local scene and stuff like that. But in Yu-Gi-Oh, I used to travel to events and I used to be very competitive. Going to YCSs, topping a couple YCSs, going to nationals and topping a bunch of that. But we used to have a pretty decently sized local circuit as well with a lot of pro players that
Mm.
came out of Texas,
Yeah.
and we used to have massive. I still remember we had one regional in 2014 that was like 10 rounds, of Swiss.
Wow.
And yeah, it was in 2014, so it was right before hat format had happened. It was during
Yeah.
+1 Firefist, and I ended up going 9-1 and top 80ing. And there's a bunch of regionals and stories like that. But I tried to compete as much as I could with Yu-Gi-Oh. But that too, I was a student. I didn't have that much of a budget, so could compete where I could.
Yeah. But despite you not having the budget to go to all events and compete at all the levels, you still have your prize cards from back then, right?
Yeah, I still have my prize cards. I have my hand. I have my Dvorak from YCS Austin, and I have a couple other cards here and there that either I've bought or I've traded for and stuff like that. But the ones I've won, I've kept still, as like a trophy.
That's awesome, man. And when you are looking at like this competitive career that you have, so to say, in Yu-Gi-Oh! And then also playing Magic locally, how long was it really a period of time in your life that you focused your energy on this?
I want to say it's mostly while I was in, a student, so high school, and I was at university and stuff like that, because I had so much more free time then. But now that I've gotten older, I have less and less free time and stuff like that. So I have less time to just sit and play games or sit and practice or sit and goldfish a deck out. So it's just become less of a thing that I can do now. But back then, I would spend like maybe 3 hours a night just clicking or playing in person or whatever it may be, going to a local, locals or whatever.
So what was really your favorite part about that competition? Not only in Yu-Gi-Oh, but in Magic too. And do you still play these games today?
Yu-Gi-Oh, I still kind of play, but I mostly play the older formats. New constructed Yu-Gi-Oh is just not a thing for me. Like, so I play more like people do hat format, they do goat format, they do Edison, which are three like retro formats for Yu-Gi-Oh, which are very popular because the Yu-Gi-Oh then is much more back and forth, and there's a lot more interaction that you can do compared to what it is now. Obviously, now you have all these like hand traps is what the term is in Yu-Gi-Oh, but basically it's cards that you can play from your hand that interact with your opponent, and it's just too much of a combo focus format where you're just trying to do a bunch of things and hope your opponent can't do anything. But I would say that Yu-Gi-Oh got most of my attention when it came to everything because it was just a very back and forth thing, and you get that feeling that like, haha, I got you. You know what I mean? Like Yu-Gi-Oh has that innately because they have the trap cards and stuff like that. And they also have like the ability to outplay your opponent where you could, basically bait them into doing something that, screws them over. So I still remember there was one time there's a card called Torrential Tribute in Yu-Gi-Oh, which says when you flip it over, it destroys all monsters on the field. And it happens when a monster is summoned. So I sat there and I waited. My opponent started going off and this and that. And he summoned a bunch of monsters. And right at the last potential moment where he was about to make the exceed that makes all his stuff were immune to spell and trap cards, I flipped the Torrential and I could just see the look on his face go, oh no. And it's just moments like that you're like, this is where the game is fun because you sat there, you memorized, you did it all properly, and you found a way to, do something that's really cool and win.
Yeah, I know these moments myself, and they are just so amazing. And that's why I love to play these old formats too. And yeah, I'm really happy that we still can play them today. And also it's possible because like not only people enjoy the format, but also like there are plenty of cards available in Yu-Gi-Oh to choose from. There's also plenty of resources. I really like also that there are even players that are like shaping the meta in these old formats, even though this game is so old, right? They're still finding like new ways. It's pretty amazing.
You can see that with Edison a lot too, because in Edison, there's decks that didn't exist back in 2008, 2009, 2010, where like, the card pool was there. But now because so many people are sitting here innovating, making new decks and stuff like that, you have these brand new decks that have popped up. Like I think there's like a plant deck that really didn't exist back then, with Crystallis or something. I forgot what the name of the card is, but it wasn't a concept back then. But now all of a sudden it's a really good deck and people are playing it all the time and stuff like that. And you could get that too eventually when Flesh and Blood reaches some sort of, legacy period, I think in like 5-10 years, where you can be like, oh, I
Yeah.
want to go back and play, Uprisings Constructed. Or I want to go back and play, Outsiders Constructed. And I remember that really well and
Yeah.
stuff like that.
Exactly. Yeah. I think really that's the next point that we need to talk about here. Like at least starting with Flesh and Blood, you needed to stop playing these other games before, right? So where
Yeah.
was really the point that you said like, okay, I'm stopping to play Yu-Gi-Oh for the
Yeah.
most part, or Magic?
Yeah. So Yu-Gi-Oh mostly happened around the introduction of Links. Links is like one of their
Mm.
summoning mechanics in the game where you basically tribute off two monsters to summon, like a blue creature, because they're all color coded in Yu-Gi-Oh. So
Yeah.
essentially the game got too fast for me. I was much more like a control E combo player over the years. I played decks like Dino Rabbit and decks that played Oppression, Stun, Cleaforge, stuff like that. And it just became impossible to play decks like that because everyone is trying to make a big board that just prevents you from playing from the first turn. So once we got to that level, I was just like, this is not for me. And at that time, I had a lot of my friends that used to play Yu-Gi-Oh! Would start shifting over to Magic. But then
Yeah.
in Magic, the same thing happened around 2019, 2020. The format got
Mm.
very, very fast. They introduced the first Modern Horizon set, and that
Mm.
really pushed the power level of Magic. And then on top of that, you had a
Oh.
couple sets that came out right during COVID, before COVID, which released cards like Oko, Thief of Crowns, and Uro, Titan of Nature's Wrath, which just made it incredibly hard to play, and cards like Hogak as well. So we started seeing a lot of that, and at the same time, we had 2020 happen, and a lot of local game stores were closed. You couldn't really play.
Yeah.
So I was trying to find another game to play because, like, I as much as people like to say, I'm not very a casual player, so I didn't really like Commander because I spent
Mm.
10 years playing, competitive games, and all of a
Yeah.
sudden they're like, oh no, we're gonna sit here and play casual Commander. Like, nah, I can't do that. So I was trying to find something, and I went to my local game store right when they were open back up. Come say hi to everybody, visit, say everybody. I haven't seen them in almost 6 months to a year, and they had a set of Crucible of War that had just come out
Mm.
a couple weeks prior, and they're like, hey, it's a new card game from New Zealand, and it's a lot of people like it, and try it out. So I bought a box. I opened a pack, and my first cold foil I ever pulled was a cold foil Aether Conduit, one of the most useless cards ever printed in Flesh and Blood. But it looked cool. I was like, oh, this is sick because it looks like the old school Yu-Gi-Oh! Ultimate Rares. And
Mhm.
a lot of the stuff from the game. And then I was reading around and I saw a Viscerai token. And I was like, oh, Viscerai, that looks cool. And I started building a Viscerai deck. And then back then, a lot of people weren't really playing CC because it was much easier to get the cards to play Blitz. So people were playing a lot of Blitz tournaments and stuff early on. So I had built the Fatigue Turtle Viscerai deck that just sits there and makes rechance, and it's like, okay, I'm going to kill you now. And I was like, that fits my style, right? Because I'm controlling, I'm blocking, and then all of a sudden I'm like, okay, you're dead. And, the first time I did that combo against someone, I was just like, oh, this is the game. This is it. This is amazing. And then I started doing a little bit more research on the game because I was just like, oh, this is a great game and stuff like that. And I found out that the guys who make Flesh and Blood are actually former Yu-Gi-Oh players. And a lot of them I've crossed paths with early on in life. And, I used to buy cards from them and stuff like that. And so it ended up coming like full circle. Like, I started with Yu-Gi-Oh! And I kind of ended up with Yu-Gi-Oh! With Fab and stuff like that.
Yeah. Yeah, it's also like you talked about that back and forth in Yu-Gi-Oh! In the early days with Edison and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
And that's like kind of the feeling that you can get when playing Flesh and Blood, I think, right?
Yeah, exactly. That's the best part about it. And I think that's why a lot of people like it. It's just like you don't feel like you can't do anything at any time, right? Like
Yeah.
you can play. Like you'll get new cards to play with. It's not like you can draw a bad hand and be stuck with it for the rest of the game. Stuff like
Yeah.
that.
So when you discovered Flesh and Blood, maybe you can talk a little bit more about your experience that you had then going forward, because you not only played the game, but you then decided to go to those events, meet new people, and also, start selling cards, actually.
Yeah. So I started initially, with Crucible, and the next set that came out after Crucible was Monarch. Now, Monarch is obviously very infamous in the Flesh and Blood space for about what happened and how all the prices went crazy and this and that. And because of that, it became very difficult to get the cards to play. And I really wanted to play Chain because I loved Runeblade, and, Chain was the next Runeblade. So I was like, okay, we're going to build it. But the problem came with acquiring cases, because at that time, cases were going north of 1,500, 1,600, 2,500 US per case for 4 boxes. That's kind of ridiculous. But I ended up seeing something, and I think a lot of people saw it too, but I guess they were too focused on the cold foil craze at the time is that the unlimited version of the set was coming out 30 days later, and the price on that was like $250 a case, and it had the exact same cards. So I was like, I'll just buy a bunch of this, and maybe I could sell the extras, I guess. So I did some math. I have a friend who's a well-known mathematician, and I asked him, I was like, hey, there's 280 something cards in this set. Let's say I want 3 of each card. How much do you think I would need to buy technically to mathematically get everything? And he goes, probably about 20 cases. I'm like, okay. So I had sold off my Magic collection, and so I had a little bit of money left over, because I don't like throwing new money into my card game pool. I like just using the same money and refreshing it over and over again. So I was like, okay, I sold my Magic collection. I had sold it for about $20,000 to $25,000. So I used some of that money. I was like, okay, let's spend some of it to buy some Monarch Unlimited cases. And I bought those Monarch Unlimited cases, got my set out, and then sold all the extras. And then I was like, this is pretty profitable. Then I was like, okay, let's get some of the older stuff. Let's get some WTR and ARC and some stuff like that. Because at the time, Crucible Unlimited wasn't out either. So it's like, okay, let's get some let's get some of that stuff in, and maybe I can get a CNC and foil too, because I was playing with non-foils at the time. I was like, maybe I can get a foil CNC. I bought a bunch, opened it, did the same thing, sold the extra CNC, sold the extra Artivores, the Grasps, all that stuff. And eventually it just all started to go full circle, and it just snowballed into what it became now, where with Hunted, for example, I'll be opening up 700 cases.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's crazy. That's crazy numbers.
Yeah. So it's mostly just that. And then like the playing stuff, the more I started to open cards, the less and less I got time to play, because now I have to do some orders, I have stuff like that.
Yeah.
So it started eating into it. But at the same time, it's a way for me to be involved with the game without having to actually be involved. Like I still play. We had a Battle Hardened in Houston in early December. I got to play. Ended up losing my last 2 rounds, which if I would have won, I would have gotten top 8. But, and then I played in Calling Chicago a couple of weeks ago. I had a last minute work trip, and I ended up just being in Chicago at the time. So I got to go and actually play at the event, hang out with some friends, and, I had some good times. But my playing days, I feel like, are going less and less, but my involvement in the game, I feel like it's getting more and more. The more I open, the more I sell singles, the more I try to get all these players their cards so they could play.
Yeah, actually you're helping a lot of players getting their play pieces for the game that they need. Also, like you said, with the next set, the Hunted, you're helping players get the cards as early as possible. And you're not only like selling them locally, but I know a lot of players myself in Europe that also buy from you, for example.
So I sell across the world, Southeast Asia, Latin America, Europe, and as well as, North America. Most of what I sell is 2 players, but I have a large secondary business that sells to stores. So I stock a lot of stores in Latin America, some in Europe, not as much, but some in Europe, and then a lot in Southeast Asia and America as well. Mostly America for that, where they'll buy like 15 to 20 of each Majestic, 10 to 15 of each foil, a couple legendaries of each, couple marbles, and it's like a starter pack. So with the cost of cases now going up higher and higher, it's more cost effective for them to buy exactly what they need and then just sell it for 20-30% margin and, make their money back, because they're guaranteed to get what they want to sell versus, having to open all the packs and let me take the risk. Yeah.
So when we're coming to Flesh and Blood, there's like this one huge milestone that gets the players up on the world each year, and that's the World Championship.
Yeah.
For 2025, we even had the first time announced the World Tour, where players can gather additional points and then get, maybe to the top of being the World Tour player. Tell us a little bit more about your experience, because I think really you are one of those people that are going to nearly every big event in Flesh and Blood.
Yeah.
And you were also in Osaka, right? So
Correct.
Maybe you can talk a little bit through this experience.
So I think the World tour and the way that they're making the player of the year and stuff like that's very good for Flesh and Blood, because you already had a group of players like your Brody Spurlocks, your Michael Fangs and stuff like that travel to each and every single event, whether it be, you know, somewhere in Asia, somewhere in Europe, wherever it may be, and they're able to grind for the stuff. And uh, I feel like it's a good in another way, as it's similar to what Yu-Gi-Oh used to do with the Ultimate Duelist series, or they used to have these point systems where if you get enough points from playing in regionals, you can qualify for the World Championship. And I feel like having these, like, not secondary, but like these other avenues for players to compete in order to get prizes, ends up being really, really good for the company as well as the players, because it gives them something to play for, right? Like if I don't qualify during RTN or ProQuest or this or that, I still have something I can play for in order to, you know, get further, make points, get some money, prizing, whatever it may be. But at the same time, it's also very good for stores, because it gives players another reason to keep buying new cards, keep, you know, going forward and stuff like that. Like if we had this world tour during Bright Light's time, maybe Bright Lights would have sold a little bit better than what it did. But not having a reason to get the newest deck, or not having a reason to get the newest cards, or not having a reason to, you know, play for something, especially since, you know, Flesh and Blood is a very competitive game, it can hurt a lot of stores where they have a lot of product sitting there, or they have a lot of singles that they've invested in that they can't sell.
Yeah. So when you're talking about this world's experience, like, how much time actually are you focusing in your life on Flesh and Blood? I mean, this is not your main job, right?
Yeah, this is not my main job. I work mostly as an attorney, and I focus probably about 3 hours a day on Flesh and Blood, roughly. Usually I'll be at work, and then when I come back from work, you know, hang out with my family, hang out with my partner, and then I'll end up, you know, spending a couple hours before I go to bed, packing orders or opening some product while watching TV or something like that. Except during set release time. When a set releases, I request the whole week off of work, and I spend the whole week just packing orders, opening cases, and stuff like that. I think the most cases I've opened in one day by myself is about 200. So about 800 boxes throughout the course of one day, just ripping and sorting it as I go. So you know, there's a lot of coffee involved, a lot of TV shows. I think I run out of stuff to watch while I open, but you know, just gotta rip through it all. Especially when they do these events like Memphis, which is on the release weekend, because a lot of players want to play the newest deck. So a lot of players want to get the newest cards that weekend. But if you don't open them and you don't have them available, it becomes really difficult to do that.
Wow, yeah, those crazy numbers, really. And when someone watches this and thinks like, yeah, I want to get some cards from Hemal, like, where's the best place to contact you?
So I don't have a website, and I went with a different mindset when it came to this, because I felt that in this day and age, everybody has a website. Everybody has the same Shopify. Everyone has the same, you know, whatever it may be. And it all looks cookie cutter. It all looks the same. There's nothing that makes you stand out. But having this one-on-one conversation type of business where they can reach out to me through X, through Blue Sky, through Facebook, through Discord, through my email, and that's all available on all social media. So if you click on one, you'll find it on the other. My advertisements are on all the Savage Feats Battle Hardened streams as well.
Yeah.
And, you know, so essentially they can reach out to me at my Discord users or my Twitter or whatever it may be, and just tell me what they want. And I'll, you know, we'll have a conversation out there. I'll get you a list of everything I have. I'll shoot you pictures if you want certain types and certain, you know, certain conditions and stuff like that, and get you like a white glove service to get the cards you need. But I also offer bundles when sets come out. Let's say you don't want to open any cases. You know, you just want to get everything in the set. You don't want to have all this extra stuff lying around everywhere. I do bundles as well, where you can get the full set, non-foil, rainbow foil, cold foil, whatever it may be, and you just get them in package deals for, depending on what, you know, variant you choose, can go anywhere from about $900 for a full set to a couple $1,000s for a full set with marbles and such.
All right, so I will include at least your mail in the description. Yeah. So if anyone wants Flesh and Blood cards, then they can get onto you.
For sure.
Yeah, but tell us a little bit more about the bazaar. You talked about this experience that you're offering already, but yeah, what is it really that like these singles are in the market right now, because in 2024, actually the prices shifted a little bit for the staples, right?
Yeah.
Prices were coming up. And so tell us a little bit from your perspective, like how does that look, and like what does it do to the players that are coming to the game?
It's good and bad. It's good in the sense that, people want the stuff that they buy to not be worthless at the end of the day, right? Like if you bought a CNC for 100 euros, whatever the price may be, you don't want it to go to 20 euros. Then you feel really bad that you wasted 80 euros on it, or, sure, you got the enjoyment to play it, but, it's still like a bad beats in a way. But at the same time, it becomes very difficult for new players to join when they see a card that they need 3 of. And no matter what hero they play, they potentially need 3 of that. And now you see that €100 price tag, or the 100 USD price tag, or whatever currency. And you're like, that's a lot of money. Now, 100 USD or 100 euro to some people may not be enough, but to a lot of people, that's a lot of money. And that's like, a month's salary when you convert it over to some local currencies and stuff like that. So it becomes a problem to get new players in when you have a lot of these high price staples. I feel like ideally you want some of these cards to have stepping stones, similar to how the CNC is a good example, but it's also a bad example. CNC shouldn't be so high, in my opinion, Command and Conquer, but Command and Conquer has the best model to show what is an ideal version of what it should be. So at the top end, you have the Kasai CNC, right? Which is what they gave out for the death match. And that's about 2,000 to 3,000 USD. And then the next tier down would be your Alpha, which is, your first edition printing at around 1,400 to 1,200 USD. And then you go down one more and you had the Fabled from Dynasty at around 800 USD. And you can go down again and you have the Rainbow Foil from Unlimited for about 150 USD. And then if you go down one more, then you have the non-foil, and then you have the foreign black border and white border and stuff like that. But I think you need to just keep creating these levels. So essentially, I think it gives you like a stepping stone. So like, I have the lowest version, but now I can get one above and then one above and then slowly climb through, which lets both old players keep, some value of their decks, but new players also get easy entry. And I feel like the easiest way to do that is if you just create new artworks, right? So original Command & Conquer, we have the art. Let's say, Alex, you bought a Rainbow Foil version from Unlimited, and you really don't want a reprint of that same art because it creates a really, weird problem where it's like, okay, well, what's the difference now? Like he can get one, but I've already spent so much money. But if it's a different artwork, it's a whole nother story, right? Because now you know that your thing will have this artwork, but that new one will have another artwork, which creates like a different stepping thing. But with all that in mind, the biggest problem a lot of stores are facing now is the inability to stock cards like CNC, E-Strike, Art of War, Codex of Fealty, Warmonger, Diplomacy, because there's so many new players that are coming in. Every player needs 3 of each card. And on top of that, some of the sets where they came out from are just so much out of print, like WTR, Welcome to Wraith, Arcane Rising, where E-Strike and Command & Conquer and Art of War are out of print, and they've been out of print since they were the first 2 sets of Flesh and Blood.
Yeah.
So it's very hard to get more, and it's hard for a store to be like, hey, I need to get this. So now you do have History Pack, but History Pack is also more expensive. There's so many other cards in that set, so it's not a guarantee that you're going to hit the exact card you want, and it becomes very hard for a store to stock. Like, so as an example, I went to Calling Chicago about a week or so ago, and I walked around the room in the morning. Before the hall was open to the public, I was able to get in, and I talked to all the vendors, as a lot of them are my friends, and we interface at events. So I walked each booth and I counted how many E-Strikes, CNCs, Codex, Warmongers, and all those cards were available. At the start of the day, there was single-digit numbers total between all the booths. I think CNC, so it was a total of 9 non-foils in the room. Lightning Strikes, it was a total of about 12. Art of War, there was a lot more, but that's more because the card was banned in Classic Constructed, and a lot of people sold their copies. Warmongers, there was maybe about 9. Codex, there was about 6 or 7. Now, for a whole room of 200, 300, 400 players across 5 to 6 vendors, for them to have that few amount of these key cards for Flesh and Blood Constructed, it becomes a problem. And that's why I feel like they should do a reprint set and try to get, something, or just inject more into the Flesh and Blood marketplace.
Yeah. So when we are talking about this this philosophy, I think that in Flesh and Blood is when reprinting cards, right? I want your opinion on this, also with your Yu-Gi-Oh background, because reprints are notorious in Yu-Gi-Oh, right? You know that like every card gets printed into the ground, and I myself also was for a long time of the mindset that that is a bad thing to happen. But now that I've been involved with Flesh and Blood for 3 years, and now we are at this point where a lot of players want to play Flesh and Blood because it's just such a great game. And also there are a lot of competitive players who wants to get into the game and they really need these staples to compete at a high level. What do you think is a strategy to not let the players down who already invested their money into this, but then also let new players in? Like what kind of strategy would you say is appropriate at this point?
I think I've already talked to some of the LSS guys about this, but I feel like there's 3 ways that you could go about it. The first way is to use the expansion slot, right? The expansion slots in every set. These new sets don't really go out of print for about a year or so, and they get opened because they're the newest set. So, like, let's say hypothetically with Hunted coming out, you stick Command and Conquer as an alt art in the expansion slot. People are going to open boxes, and it causes the new set to be open more as well. And they have a chance of pulling the Command and Conquer, and they can get more Command and Conquers injected into the ecosystem this way. And this is a proven thing because they did this with surgical extraction in Dust Till Dawn. So we know that this method works. Then the second way I can think of is using their new gem pack, which is a offshoot kind of what the OTS Astral pack and the tournament pack type of thing that Yu-Gi-Oh used to do, where they have variants of cards that are already existing in the card pool, but in higher rarities or whatever it may be. Like imagine like Sink Below before the Judge packs, you get a Cold Foil or a Marvel this way or something like that. So I feel like you could do it that way by printing non-foil alt arts variants and stuff like that inside the gem pack to inject more supply. And that's also something Yu-Gi-Oh used to do with some of the older, harder to find fusion monsters or normal monsters, or just a random card that got printed years ago that doesn't have much supply. So they just put a bunch into the OTS pack, and they know every game store is going to open boxes of them. So they injects a decent amount of supply into the ecosystem. So that's another way that you could do it. And the last way is a reprint set. And a reprint set, I don't think is good enough at this point, because we've already seen several reprint sets, both that are in English, in foreign languages like German, Spanish, French, as well as in Japanese. And they both have had the same problem where either A, the set is not worth it overall to open, B, there's not enough supply to open to get enough cards, or C, the set's just hard to find, right? So if you go to A, you would look more at a history pack Black Border, where a lot of the cards in that, other than the Marvels, don't really sell for much, and a lot of people don't really want the cards. Like if you look in America, like it's really hard to sell the Command and Conquers from those sets in America. I usually, whenever I get them in collections, I ship them off to my friend in Europe, in Austria, and I'm like, hey, you sell it, because here in America it's not going to sell. At least if you put it on Card Market, there'll be some guy in Europe who'll be able to get it. The other way is with the archive packs in Japan. And the archive packs in Japan, sure, there's all these cards and stuff like that, but the set overall, to open up all them and to only get about 3 to 4 Majestics, and to hit that one and to get a play set, you got to open up so many boxes. It becomes difficult. But then in America, you have the last option, which is the history pack, the white border. It's impossible to find, for example. Several stores, when the set first came out, which is right around Pro Tour New Jersey, it was just severely small allocations. Like, for example, one of the bigger stores I know that I work a lot with, he usually gets about 200 to 300 cases of each new set from distribution. With history pack, he got 15 cases. So it's just not enough. And on top of that, it's also a massive set to hit that, and the cost is higher too, because it's a 36 pack set. So to do all of that and to get that one specific card, it becomes a little bit of a problem for a lot of people to get.
So there's one more option that I know that we experienced in Yu-Gi-Oh! And I'm curious to hear your opinion on this too. And that's like reprints that are coming through the starter decks.
Yeah.
For example, like those KO or those Yao Armory decks that we have in Flesh and Blood. What do you think about like Command and Conquer and Lightning Strike and those ones?
I think you can do it, but you have to do it with another reprint. For example, like if I were to do the expansion slot, stick it in there, and then put it in the Armory deck, then it's fine. Because I feel like if you put it just in the Armory deck, you'll get a situation where people will just buy out the Armory deck to get the cards they need. And then at that point, the Armory deck does nothing because it's not helping new players join the game because it's sold out everywhere. So like it defeats the purpose. I think the Armory deck reprint would work really well when you're trying to just inject supply, but you're not trying to meet demand, right? Like right now, the demand is so high because there's just not enough supply. And then on top of that, the price is high because there's not enough supply. So if you fix that portion first, and then you just want to like, hey, we want to have like easy ways to get it. So we're going to make Armory decks, what deck plays all three usually? I don't know, Armory deck chain, and let's put a new chain in there. 3 Command and Conquers, 3 E-Strikes, 3 Art of Wars, and just stick them in the deck. Different art has chain doing stuff on it. Magic does something similar when they did the Spellbook series, right? Where they have the art of the hero depicting, and you can do different cool things like that, and just to inject more supply. But I feel like you have to have a meaningful reprint first. And I think the expansion slot's the best way to do it.
Yeah, it sounds really nice to me. Like when I think about the new players at our local Armory, they would totally love this. And I mean, expansion slot in general is like, a case when you open it, and then you have a good expansion slot card. That's basically means you have some money too.
Exactly. Like we have history of that working with Tunic and Bright Lights, right? So we had Tunic reprinted and Tekla Foundry Heart reprinted. Now Tekla Foundry Heart didn't really need a reprint, but it got one. And but the Tunic was a more meaningful reprint. Like even now, Tunic sat around for around $100 US for the last year or so, and now even that supply is drying out. And Tunic is sitting at 160, 170 US because it slowly climbs. It's an essential game piece. And over time, you still need to find ways where you inject supply through. Because Yu-Gi-Oh! Has the opposite problem, like we talked about. Yu-Gi-Oh! Has this problem where they continuously let's just reprint the same card 50 times in the next 2 years, right? And what that does is it creates it becomes worthless. And then they have ban lists where they just ban the deck in general, and then the whole deck becomes worthless. So no one wants it anyways. But in Flesh and Blood, I feel like the problem is that they do a reprint and then they forget about the card for 2 years. And then they're like, crap, we need to print more. Let's do a reprint, and then they'll forget about it for 2 years. Which is fine and okay, but I feel like for these like important pieces, I think you should do like a reprint every year and a half, something like that, so you can inject more. So like let's say they put E-Strike, CNC, Art of War in the expansion slot for not Hunted, obviously, because I'm sure they've already printed it, but the next set. And a year and a half later, they're like, okay, here's an Armory deck and it has E-Strike, CNC in it. And then later, a couple months, here's another Armory deck. It has Art of War and Warmongers in it, whatever it may be. And you just slowly do that. So then every couple months you get more supply, but it's not like, oh my God, can you stop printing the same card over and over again?
So also in Flesh and Blood, we have this amazing like policy, right, with the reprints that like basically if you want to collect in the game, then if you're collecting these foils or those cold foils, not every card is protected, but a lot of these cards are protected. And maybe you can talk a little bit about that, because we already talked about a lot these players and the players market, but what really are you seeing in the other part of the game?
So the collectors market has cooled down significantly over the past couple of years, but that's mostly because the prices were so inflated to begin with that they've now reached what they should normally be. It's met actual demand. So you'll see legendaries between 800 for alpha, between 800 to like 14, 1500, and then the Tunic obviously being so much higher. But I think this reprint policy is good for both stores and for players, as it protects their buying power. Like if I buy a RF Tunic, I don't have to worry about there being another RF Tunic. And so it creates this like, firm thing. So, but the non-foil and the cheapest version, which is a good way to, drive down the price, like we can reprint this at any time, if we need to reprint it. So people get less, investing and stuff like that, but they're game pieces, so they sell pretty well. But so personally speaking, I have a full collection of Flesh and Blood, every single card I've reprinted, but that's mostly because I open so much, I sell a lot, so I'm able to just grab pieces here and there about stuff that, doesn't exist. But for me as a collector as well, it's very nice for me to know that, like, hey, my cold foil CNC will never be cold foil again, or hey, my Marvel hero will never have another cold foil version again, or whatever it may be, because it basically protects the investment, protects the buy, and it encourages people to buy more cards, right? Like, because if I'm gonna buy, like we talked about the CNC example with you, right? Like if I'm gonna buy a RFCNC and next week they print another version that's a rainbow foil, it becomes a problem. So it's like, well, why would I lose $100 willingly? Or, it just becomes really weird. But with the protections, it helps a lot of people and encourages sales for a lot of stores.
Yeah. So basically, I think for everyone that is watching and isn't aware, there are like two different like rules that Flesh and Blood is having, and that is like the rainbow foil reprint policy, where they are saying basically in the main booster set, the rainbow foils that they are printing, they will not reprint them again in the same artwork. Like they can reprint them in different artworks or maybe in extended art as a promo, but not at the same art and the same version. And then you already brought up a good example with the Kasai CNC, which is a rainbow foil, but it's a different artwork and it's a really special occasion to get that. So it really doesn't affect the main rainbow foil printing.
That and it's a promo. I think the biggest thing with the reprint policy is that they won't put it in a set either, right? And you can see that a lot with like in Rosetta, they reprinted a card called Autumn's Touch. It's a random common from Tales of Aria, but when they reprint a card in a core set like that, they don't put it in foil in the set. So the only way to get the foil originally still is to get it from the original set, but it lets them reprint and stuff like that. So it solves that Yu-Gi-Oh problem and Magic problem. Like imagine, you open up a Yu-Gi-Oh set and it's the 500th printing of Allure of Darkness, right? And now you're going to have like 50 different types of supers, 50 different types of commons, 50 different, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it kind of solves that problem. And it's the same with Magic. When Magic, they reprint a card, they print it in foil too. So then you end up with 50 different versions of foils, which is a nightmare for stores to catalog. Because now I have one from here, one from 5 years ago, one from last week, and just get all this different things, but it's the same card.
Yeah. And then this is the second one, basically the first rule that they had, and that's about the cold foils, which is pretty much the same thing like for the rainbow foils, right?
Yeah, it's the same thing, but they can make, for both things, they can print rainbow foil of the similar art, but it can be a promo. The only stipulation is that it can't be in the set. So, like, for example, if I think the best examples are the Marvels. So the Marvels in History Pack Black Border, they didn't come in cold foil in the set prior. They had promo versions. And then what they ended up doing was printing them in History Pack Black Border. And ever since then, you can't get a cold foil version in a set. But then the reverse version of that now is the Briar. So in Rosetta, there was a Briar. Originally, the cold foil was promo only, and they had two versions, one with errata and one without errata. So now when they printed the new Briar in the set with the errata in the Marvel form, now Briar can no longer come out cold foil in a set in general or as a promo and stuff like that.
Yeah. So when we are viewing like this whole market in Flesh and Blood, and then also what goes along is the whole deck price, right?
Yeah.
That players which are wanting to compete at a high level are looking at. And what are you really seeing in this like whole deck price that players are facing? Like there are different entry points, but if you want to play at a high level, like what is your opinion on that?
So what I've noticed is if most players want to play at a high level and they want to travel to events, deck price is not really a factor because they already know that they're going to have to invest into the deck in order to play. I think the issue mostly comes from new player acquisition, where it's like all these new people walk in and they see like, oh, that guy spent $1,200 on the deck. Yeah. It's going to be very difficult for me to justify spending $1,200 on a deck in a brand new game. But the thing is that if you look at it from an outside perspective, and as a store, since I build so many decks, I'm able to see it. It's like the same 5 to 10 cards that have the bulk of the price, right? Like it's your Tunics, your Command and Conquerors, your E-Strike if it's in there, and like some of your older legendaries and stuff like that. And then if you look at the core of the deck, it's relatively cheap. Like, for example, let's look at Viserai. So Viserai is a very popular deck right now. Viserai's main core deck, not including the legendaries, is roughly about $200, $250. It's a lot of commons and rares, and it's some $10 to $15 Majestics, and that's pretty much it. But if you look at the equipment suite, that's where most of the price is. Your Tunic, your Grasp of the Arknight, your Dyadic Carapace, all these cards that are hefty in price, and they're where most of the cost is associated and stuff like that. But if you have that Grasp of the Arknight, your cost for your Aurora deck, and your cost for your Chain deck in LL, and your cost for your Florian deck, and they all go down, because now significantly, like, Flesh and Blood is a game where most of the cards in your decks are usually common and rare. It's very difficult to find expensive cards. Like, even if you look at Starvo that won recently, other than the Felling of the Crowns, most of the cards in the deck are sub $10, and you can get the whole deck as a core for about $200. And if you add the Fellings in, maybe a couple extra $100-$200 on top. So for a $400 tournament-winning competitive deck, it's not bad. But then when you look at the equipment suite, that's where all the price starts to balloon out. Now, it's good and bad, because you also want to keep the investment thing, like we talked about, where people buy and they don't want their stuff to go to zero. But at the same time, you need to create that same stepping stone thing, right? Like, if they have an alt art, Tunic that's like $50, people will love it, and it keeps the original art at a higher price. People can jump on at that $50 price point. It brings the cost of the deck down by 150 USD. And it also lets them play a bunch of other decks, and helps the singles price of those go up, because if that guy is willing to spend money on another deck, or on a Syndra deck, or an Arachne deck, and now coming up with a new set, the singles start selling.
I think also what I noticed is that, like, most of the time when we're looking at these high deck prices, players in Flesh and Blood are usually like, they are like established in their life most of the time, which I meet at these high stakes events. And so they are really firm with, like, paying the price for the deck and traveling also to these big events, because it's like a little bit more, their lifestyle that they want to have. Not only like playing the game, but then also traveling, competing, having that feeling of like combining different things in this hobby. And not only like, okay, I buy a €1,000 deck, I go to locals, and then I go home. It's completely different.
Even then, people are willing to do that. And speaking of Yu-Gi-Oh, people do that in Yu-Gi-Oh all the time. The price support in Yu-Gi-Oh is not as great as Flesh and Blood, for example, but people will still buy their €1,000 to €1,500 deck just to go to locals and maybe go to a regional every now and then and play. And their top prize is a playmat and an air fryer, right? So, like, it becomes different.
I saw that too.
You saw that, right? Yeah. The guy, so for people who don't know, they entered a tournament, and the top 8 prizing for the tournament was an air fryer for Yu-Gi-Oh. So not only can you make a game-winning deck, you can make a really good meal afterwards.
Yeah, and I think you touched a little bit on the different formats already. Like, there are so many different options that you have when playing Flesh and Blood, and I also think they are mixing it up even for the big tournaments, right? And some are even like not constructed, but they are like playing sealed at callings, for example, or they're having these world premieres, like the Hunted that we are just shortly after this video coming up is held.
I think it's also important for them to do a lot. So Calling Memphis is 2 weeks after Prague, and it's one of the more unique events that they've announced. So with Calling Memphis, it's 2 callings in one. They have one calling starting on one day, on Friday, and they have another one starting on Saturday. I think going forward, if they do these on release weekends, but they flip it. So the problem with Memphis is that they have the what's it called? The Classic Constructed starting on Friday and the Sealed starting on Saturday. I feel like it should be inverted, because once you sit down and you look at your sealed pool, you could tell almost instantly, like, oh, this is, I don't know about this, or, oh, this is really good. I think I can win. You know what I mean? Like, you could tell almost instantly, like, this, I have a bunch of yellows. I'm not going to do anything. Or, this is cracked. I opened 3 Majestics. I'm going to win. I'm going to beat everybody, So if they do that going forward at all these, world premiere events, it drives people to want to show up at these events and stuff like that.
Yeah. And then also, if I'm looking at like the new player experience, I think in 2024 and also in 2025 coming up, there are a lot of options to get into the game and get a grind, even with not spending that much money. And that's also like what I do at my locals. I spend like €150 on my KO deck, and I'm crushing decks that are worth €1,000. So of course, I'm not winning always, but
But that's the good thing, right? The good thing is that creating an easy way for a lot of new players to get in, and from what I know from what I've heard from some of the Flesh and Blood devs, and from what I've heard about what they announced at Worlds, is that they have a new product coming out called Smash Palace, and that's going to be coming out around, I want to say, middle of the year next year, if I remember correctly. And that's supposed to be a new player product and stuff like that. So I feel like them just doing a lot more of these new player products to get people in and reprinting a couple key cards will make everything just amazing and grow even more. Because the bigger problem now is that even if the new players wanted to spend the money, we just don't have the supply to supply them the cards, right? Like there's just not enough CNCs, not enough E-Strikes, not enough Warmongers, for example, or Codex to go around.
So then when you're talking about this this new set that is coming out, the Hunted and then the Smash Palace afterwards, I'm pretty sure not everyone will be able to play Flesh and Blood, but the ones that want to play in this year, they can definitely try out. And I think it's just, I mean, you played Yu-Gi-Oh, you played Magic, and then you're getting into Flesh and Blood. There's just so much time that you can spend on a hobby. And I think also, like, with a lot of new TCGs on the line, I just am really excited to see, like, where Flesh and Blood's position is in this year. But I think definitely with what you're talking about, the prices and also, like, the availability, I would love to see, like, the availability go up and then new players, like, joining the game for sure.
And you know, a lot of the older players, they'll always complain, like, you know, like, oh, don't reprint this card, it's going to make this go down or this or that. But the thing is that the logic that I always entered in with, and this is why I always try to steer away from the higher end stuff. Like, I don't really sell that much of the high end stuff. It's mostly the playables and stuff, because my logic is if I get more people to play and I get more players to buy cards, my older cards will be worth more because there'll be more people that want them, right? Because if it's the same 10 people that buy the same gold foil tunic and cold foil tunic and this and that, then eventually it's just going to drop down when there's one or two of them become uninterested. But if I keep getting more and more people in the room, then the price will eventually go up, because eventually that one casual player that you brought to an Armory on Tuesday, Alex, he's going to want to buy a cold foil tunic because he's been playing the game for 5 years. It's a collection piece he's always wanted. Or, you know, that guy that you met standing outside your locals waiting for it to open one day, you know, he suddenly wants to max out his deck and he wants all these Fables and Marvels and this and that. And those are the people that Flesh and Blood wants to encourage to join in. But you can't get them to buy anything until you get them in the door.
Yeah, exactly. And when you're looking at it, like from the view of the high rarity player, like you described it just, I think there are so many possibilities, right, in Flesh and Blood, because not only like the printings are protected in a way, but there are also like so many beautiful ways to play. I think very good examples of this are, of course, the illusionist decks, but then also for those that are interested in spending a lot of money on the game, there are also very interesting cards, like you mentioned, the gold for prize cards, for example. I think it's something that I saw at Yu-Gi-Oh! A lot, and I think you know it too. Like these high rare players. And so I'm excited for those.
And that's the problem I have too, because I'm a high rarity player. So, like, for example, you have one of these rare cards, right? You have a cold foil Felling at the Crown. So that gives all these new players, like, obviously this is not very easily accessible to a lot of people because there's not that many that exist, because all the content creators got one for doing a spoiler video. And so just having these subtle small chases, you know, these subtle rarity upgrades and stuff like that, it helps a lot of people. Plus, I feel like there's a large overlap between Yu-Gi-Oh! And Flesh and Blood. And I've seen a lot of players, because, you know, in Yu-Gi-Oh! Everyone uses the same, you know, white sleeves, and everyone plays on the spell ground, and everyone has a max rarity deck. And I see that a lot when I go to locals or when I go to tournaments. And it's like that Spider-Man meme. I'm just like, oh, it's you.
Yeah, exactly. I think it's a little bit different from my experience that I have in Germany, but I feel the more I go to international events, I see that what you're describing. I really hope in the future that in Germany or in Europe in general, like, more players from the Yu-Gi-Oh! Community find their way to Flesh and Blood. And I know that the pros that I know from my past Yu-Gi-Oh! Days that I'm talking to, they are interested in the game for sure. but it's just that they are like more interested in either trying out One Piece or Disney Lorcana at the moment, or they don't have a locals for Flesh and Blood, at least at the moment.
It's the same in America. In America, a lot of the old Yu-Gi-Oh guys I know are either they're too focused on Yu-Gi-Oh, you know what I mean? Like they've played it for so long that they just don't want to play something else. But the other thing that I've noticed is a lot of them either shift over to One Piece or they shift over not to Lorcana, but to what's the other game? Just any Japanese style card game, basically, because it just the aesthetic, it fits that more for them, or whatever it may be. It's just they're used to the gameplay mechanics. Because Flesh and Blood, although it's from the Southeast Asia region and APAC and stuff like that, it has a more Western card game feel to it, similar to Magic. We have your resource system and stuff like that, and a lot of Yu-Gi-Oh players just like exploding their hand on the table. And in Flesh and Blood, you can't really do that. But I think that's what teeters them off from it. But in like Lorcana, you can kind of do it, but in One Piece, it's more of that. I get to take control or do broken things, basically.
Yeah, I have my 12th Dawn, and then I'm going off like
exactly.
Yeah,
in Flesh and Blood, there's no like you drew floor blues. I think you lose. You know what I mean? Like you can't really do damage.
Yeah, that's right. And I think like when I'm looking at Flesh and Blood 2, it's like I think we are so early on still. I'm very, very like happy that I've got to experience like these first few years. I wasn't there in the first or in the second year even, but I think even those 3 last years that I experienced in Flesh and Blood were so amazing, and I can't really see the game go away. But also like I hope that the game can stay for so long and that it just thrives in the future, definitely.
Yeah. I think, personally speaking, since we've been comparing Flesh and Blood to Yu-Gi-Oh! This entire podcast, I think Yu-Gi-Oh! If you compare it to Flesh and Blood, I think Flesh and Blood is in like the early GX, like that era for when you compare it to Yu-Gi-Oh! Because like it's around the same. Like the SGCs back then, you would get 200 to 800 people show up. And it's the same for the callings. The format was good, the cards were good, the mechanics were a little basic, but you still had some like cool things that came out. You had Gladiator Beast and Elemental Hero and all these cool archetypes and stuff that came out, and you could compare it to Flesh and Blood. You have the Enigma and Mystics, and you have all the Draconic stuff, you have the Assassins, and you have all these archetypes and stuff that come out. And the games are very similar in that way because they have that archetype focus, but the Flesh and Blood is your class, right? Like your Assassin's going to play like an Assassin. And it's like as if you had a hero deck in Yu-Gi-Oh! Or something like that. So I think as we go forward, hoping it grows the same way Yu-Gi-Oh! Did, but with better price support, because there's only so many air fryers and Nintendo Switches a person needs. But I think overall, I think the game is going in a good way. Sales have been great. Every year it's grown 20-30% for me. And I think the biggest thing now is just to get more people in and just get easier to get game pieces and stuff like that. Yeah.
I also see like a phenomenon in these pro players. Some of them not only play Flesh and Blood at a high level, but they play multiple games actually. And like that's crazy to me to think about. That a player like invests the time to not only play one game at a high level, but then contributes the time and plays like another game on the line.
Like Simon, who you had on your podcast. He plays Magic very, very well, and he plays Flesh and Blood very, very well. But you also see a lot of overlap now with that, right? Like Andrea Mengucci is starting to play Flesh and Blood and stuff like that, and he's a high level Magic player. And hopefully, like I think that with a lot of these higher level players dabbling into Flesh and Blood, they'll end up causing a lot of overlap and stuff like that. Like Yu-Gi-Oh, it's going to be a little bit difficult, but I think Magic the Gathering is what you'll see most of the players come forward, because eventually they'll get tired of playing their SpongeBob into their Spider-Man into their Wizard of Oz card.
Yeah, definitely. I think so too. Let's shift the points a little bit towards this next season, because the Hunted is coming up, and like what are your plans actually for this next season?
So like I said, I'm going to be opening up 700 cases of Hunted. It's roughly about 2,800 boxes. So I offer all those singles and stuff like I do every single time. Sadly, I will not be at Prague or Memphis. Prague because I have a family event at that time, Memphis is
Yeah.
because I'm going to be at a friend's wedding, and I had planned that before they announced Memphis. So I'm like,
Yeah.
well, I'm not going to say no to my friend. So I'll be, going to that event. I'll be going to the events afterwards. I believe there'll be a couple U.S. callings, maybe, or one U.S. calling before London that they haven't announced yet, or that they will be announcing. And then I'll be at London for sure, and I'll be at most of the major events throughout the year.
Yeah. So with 2025 just starting when the port is coming out, what are you most excited about in this year for Flesh and Blood?
I think what I'm the most excited about is how they start to fix some of the heroes that have problems. Like, for example, in this set, we have this really good Bolton card, right? And there's some of these heroes that they've released when they powered down the game, like Teklovasin, like Max Nitro. I want to see how they fix them and how they reintroduce these new heroes, because we're getting to this point in Flesh and Blood where we have a lot of heroes, but half of them are not that good. But at the same time, we were promised as a community that if your hero Living Legends, the next year or so, you'll get another version back, right? So we're going to hit the Lexi, the Icelander, the Dromai, and the Briar. The Briar we kind of got, but not really. You know what I mean? Like, Briar got split up into two heroes, essentially, with Florian and Aurora. But even then, you could say, like, where's my Briar? I want a new Briar, right? I want an Earth Rune Blade Lightning hero. So going to see where that goes and how that goes forward. Like, they introduce Jarl in the Armory deck, and that's kind of like the new Oldhim with Earth and Ice and stuff like that. So I want to see how they do it, how they introduce new heroes. I think the Armory deck is a great way to do it, but also I feel like you could just print like a hero and 5 or 6 Majestics that go with that hero in the expansion slot, and then just have that new hero come out in the new set or something like that.
Yeah. So not only is it exciting for you in the next year, but also I want to hear your opinion on these players that are investing in this game. And not only like Flesh and Blood, I want to hear your opinion on, like, in general, like people that are putting their money and thinking that their cards are their investments.
Yeah.
And I'm asking about this because I was guilty of this in the past too, and I've just shifted my mindset in the last 3 years, I have to say.
Yeah.
But when someone is watching this, and we talked a lot about like the money side on Flesh and Blood and in TCGs in general, like what would you say to someone that is having all their money in cards actually?
Don't do it. So it's a commodity in a way, right? Because the best way I like to explain to people who are in the TCG space about what trading cards is that you're an art broker. You're selling art, right? I'm selling this really nice version of this one painting, whether it be the felling that I showed you, right? So that's a rare art painting, essentially. And all you're doing is hoping that one day that rare art painting goes up. And now at the end of the day, it gets into this weird gray area where it's like, someone could just not want it, right? It's not like a stock. It's not like a car. It's not like something that has a use case. Sure, it's a game piece where you can play with it, but there's also a cheaper version that I can buy, and it does the exact same thing. So what I like to tell people is to invest in the cards that you want to use to play. But if you want to toss some money into it and maybe get a return back, buy the highest rarity version of it. Now, don't think that it's going to go up. Just think of it as a way to get your money back consistently. Because what ends up happening is, like, if I buy a cold foil tunic for, let's say, 4,000 USD, right? I can probably sell that cold foil tunic for 4,000 USD to get my money back, essentially. But now, if I bought a gold foil tunic, or if I bought, a rainbow foil tunic, hoping that, I spent 180, I'm going to get my 180 back, and I'm going to buy 50 copies of it and this and that. Like, it's just not going to work out in the long term. It works out easier for stores because they're able to let it go and get some more and let it go. And you have the cash flow that comes through it. But a lot of collectors that will just sit on sealed product, or just sit on singles, or just sit on high-end cards and just fingers crossed, hope and pray that it goes up in price. It always never ends well.
Yeah. And also, like, when you have all your money tied up in cards, it also creates like a feeling in your life, right?
Yeah.
Because you're not really in security, really.
Yeah.
And you're also like, when things come up, it can get pretty like nasty.
Exactly.
So it's pretty daunting. At least it's emotional to be in cards, right? But I think like just for someone that needs this.
I think the bigger issue is if you look at like the best example of what can happen is with Art of War. So Art of War Cold Foil was $1,000 card, right? You could only get it from the judge back. They're very hard to get, very good card, very commodity. It went from when they banned Art of War a couple months back, the card went from roughly $1,000 to about 400 to 500 USD. Now, if any stock portfolio, any investment portfolio saw a 50% drop, they'd be like, "Oh my God, what happened?" Right? And but now the problem is that it also becomes not liquid, right? Like if I were to take that $400 or $500 piece and I try to sell it, everyone knows that it's untouchable. It's never going to be useful. So people are not going to offer you what the fair market value is. At least in the event when a stock, goes down, you have the option to liquidate it at something and, get your money back. There's a lot more ease of access and there's a lot more people that you could sell to, because now you're a Cold Foil Art of War. You're not going to sell it to the new guy who showed up at the Armory. No, the old collector already has 3 of them, so he's already just as bad as you do. So who are you going to sell them to, really? The stores aren't going to buy them because they know it's not going to sell. So it becomes this weird problem where you spent so much money hoping to invest, and now you got burned, but no one wants to help you out.
Yeah. So I'm hoping that everyone that's still watching doesn't really have this problem, but I hope if you have this problem that this like helps you forward, going forward in the future for sure. So I want to give you the space here at the end of the video, at the end of the podcast, to shout out anyone that you want to shout out.
Yeah, for sure. So shout out to the Flesh and Blood community. Y'all helped me run the singles card business at Hammurabi TCG, and we keep it going every single set and growing more and more. Shout out to Alex. Ever since we had food together and what was it, San Jose, Ape Strong together.
That's right.
Right, Ape Strong together.
That's right.
I've been able to make a bunch of great friends like Alex and a lot of the other content creators and stuff like that through Flesh and Blood, and that's what Flesh and Blood I think mostly is. It's a card game second, but it's a way, it's a way to meet people, it's a way to hang out, it's a way to get good friendships for life that way. A shout out to Ethan Van Sant. He makes all my advertisements for me and stuff like that. The Lego ad, the other ads. He's a great cinematographer. He's a great guy to plan all these productions and stuff with. And shout out to the guys at LSS for making a good product, especially Chris Garrett.
That's right. Yes, he's the man.
Yeah.
So, Hemal, I just want to thank you really for taking the time.
Yeah, no worries.
It's an honor. And sadly we won't see us in Prague, but hopefully in the next year.
Hopefully, maybe I see you in London. Not too far from you, or.
I won't make it sadly there. Yeah,
it's all good.
We will miss us
hopefully
there.
We'll see each other at some point. Maybe Worlds at the end of the year or something. We can catch on up. But it's been a pleasure to be on your podcast. Thank you for listening to me ramble for hours. As you can tell, I like to talk and I talk a lot. But thanks for being patient with me.
Yeah, man, thanks so much.
No worries.
And for like the viewers that want more, there are some other episodes, also Yu-Gi-Oh players actually, that I interviewed during the time of this recording, and we see us in the next video.
Yeah.